All right, so we are back with another Stopping Socialism video. I am Donnie Kendall, joined by Justin Haskins. Justin, I want to talk to you about this article that I found on the Daily Beast, and it is titled Team Trump Plans Its Assault on Bernie, Step 1, Victims of Socialism. So it goes on to talk about how that the Team Trump reportedly saw this as a two-person race. They really thought that it was going to be either Elizabeth Warren that they were facing off against or Joe Biden. So apparently, Team Trump is not writing off the self-identified socialist anymore, Bernie Sanders. So, according to 4 sources familiar with internal deliberations, an aggressive anti-Bernie effort is already being drafted inside the Trump campaign, the Republican National Committee, and allied organizations. One of the major ideas being kicked around is to deploy more victims of socialism and communist regimes to make their case via video testimonials against Sanders' vision of governance. So, first question, Justin, is Team Trump, assuming that this is correct, are they right to not write off Bernie Sanders for 2020?
I think they're definitely right. I think it's looking more and more every day like Bernie Sanders has a legitimate chance of actually becoming the nominee. Let's look at what happened in New Hampshire. New Hampshire, of course, is a neighboring state for Bernie Sanders, but the really important thing, so people are not surprised that, he did well, but the really important thing here is that Bernie is gaining momentum. He did very well in Iowa, did very well in New Hampshire. Joe Biden fell off the face of the planet. He fell off the political cliff. He's basically dead at this point in time, politically, for all intents and purposes. He's gone. So there's nobody left, really, except for Bernie Sanders, Mayor Pete. Elizabeth Warren was the only real far left-wing challenger, and she's gone. At this point in time, she's done too. So, she's from Massachusetts, and she finished, 4th or something like that? So she's toast. So it's basically between Mayor Pete, who is a mayor, who's literally never held a higher office than that. And I don't think there's ever been a president in modern history, but certainly maybe ever in American history, who wasn't at the very least a member of Congress or held some other high-level executive position or was a governor or something to that effect, or at the very least famous. Because Donald Trump, of course, would be the exception to that, but he was famous. Everybody knew Donald Trump. Mm-hmm. Mayor Pete has the least name recognition and the least experience of any candidate who has ever come this close to becoming president, at least recently. And if he becomes the candidate, it's hard to imagine, or if he gets close to Bernie, it's hard to imagine him losing to somebody like Bernie Sanders, who everybody knows. So is it Amy Klobuchar really the one who's going to be the candidate that everybody,
No.
I doubt it. It seems she's so unlikable. It's hard to imagine her winning either. So I think there's nobody left. I think we're at the point now where it seemed like Joe Biden was the only viable contender, and now there's no one left. So no, Trump shouldn't be writing him off. No, absolutely not.
Yeah, that was more of a, I knew the answer to that. Anyone that watches the show, anyone that watches the In the Tank podcast with us, we've been pretty clear that we think that Bernie Sanders is the one that's going to be the nominee, unless, of course, they steal it from him. So I'm not writing that off. That's an option. So it says here that according to RNC strategists, they say that producing a number of these victims of socialism videos, that they think that this will have a big impact in Hispanic voter circles, especially in Florida. That's kind of an interesting idea. Do you think that that's viable? Do you think that that's likely to happen?
I think one of the most interesting things about what's been going on with this whole love affair with socialism in the Democratic Party is that for so long, for so many years, they were committed to playing this demographics game in states like Florida. They have been totally committed to winning the demographic game in Florida by appealing to Hispanics. Let's just be honest. That's what they've been trying to do, is appeal to Hispanics. But unfortunately for them, their commitment to socialism conflicts with that in the state of Florida, because Florida has a very large population of Cuban Americans who do not like socialism. Many of them fled from Cuba. They hate socialism, hate communism, hate the whole concept of that, because they know how disastrous it's been. They've seen it. They've experienced it. Their family members have seen it and experienced it. So they don't want it. And in addition to that, we have tons of people coming to Florida now from Venezuela. Millions of people have left Venezuela in the past several years because of the economic catastrophe that has been the socialist regime running things over there. And as a result of that, you have this massive group of people now, this growing group of people, a growing group of Hispanics in Florida that hate socialism. In addition to that, you have a bunch of people in Florida who are sort of your traditional Southern Republicans that just don't like socialism anyway. And so when you add those two things together, it is not looking good for Democrats in Florida. And socialism is a really big part of that. So I've been saying this for a long time now. Socialism is killing the Democratic Party. They are committing political suicide in states like Florida and in the Midwest too, by the way. It makes absolutely no sense, but it seems like that's where we're headed.
Yeah, well, we talked about it in a separate video that you mentioned it as like a Frankenstein that was growing in the Democratic Party. I think of it more of as growing pains, and we're seeing, sure, the death of the old Democratic Party, but the birth of the new one that's going to embrace these ideas of socialism, and just So we know what Bernie Sanders' response is going to be to this. First off, I really like this idea. I think showcasing the victims of socialism is a great idea. In fact, we had the same idea a while ago when we were first starting the Stopping Socialism project here. But you know what Bernie Sanders' response is going to be. Let me see if I could do my best Bernie Sanders impression.
Oh, God.
We're not trying to replicate the Soviet Union. We're not trying to replicate Cuba here. We're trying to replicate Denmark or Sweden. That's the socialism that I'm talking about. So that was a little mixture of Bernie Sanders and I think Sylvester Stallone. But what is your response to that?
I don't.
I'm an impression, aren't you?
Yeah, I really am. I mean, I think everyone who spent any time listening to us knows that Sweden, Norway, Denmark, all these countries in Scandinavia are absolutely not socialist paradises. They're not socialist utopias. They're not even socialist societies. These are societies that in many respects are actually freer than we are here. And if you look at the World Freedom Rankings conducted by organizations like the Heritage Foundation, the Cato Institute, Fraser in Canada, and other organizations like that, these are all right-wing organizations, in many cases even libertarian-leaning organizations. When they rank countries in the world based on freedom, economic freedom, individual liberty, all sorts of different categories, what they found is that in many different areas, Scandinavian countries rank higher than the United States. Not in every area, but in many areas they do. And even when you look at things like taxes, because tax rates are very, very high in Scandinavian countries, there's no question about that. So they're certainly not freer than we are in that sense. They may not be freer than us when it comes to tax rates, but they're less socialistic than we are because their top marginal tax rates actually start with what in America would be considered the middle class, with people who are making $60,000 and $70,000. That's where the top tax rates are in some of these countries. So they're not socialistic in any sense of the word. Low-income people pay high tax rates. They have a very, very high value-added tax, which is essentially a sales tax on steroids, 25% in a lot of these countries. So low-income people pay lots in taxes too. Does that sound like something that you would see from the Democratic Party here? The maximum tax rates on middle-class people, 25% value-added taxes so that low-income people have to pay high taxes. This is not what we have here in the United States. These are not socialist countries. You look at business freedom scores, you look at regulations, they're clearly not in that camp. So it's a lie. It's a lie that Bernie Sanders has been perpetuating for a long time. It's completely untrue. And in fact, these countries, leaders of these countries themselves have come out and said, this is not true. We are not socialists. Stop calling us socialists.
Right.
And Bernie Sanders is ignoring all of that because it doesn't help his cause politically.
Yeah, and the other thing that we talk about a lot is the idea that there's many ways to kind of go socialist economy, right? So I don't think that we're going to see the government take over the means to production like in the Soviet Union or something like that. There are multiple ways that government can instill top-down central planning. Sweden found this out the hard way during the 70s and the 80s. So it's basically like, how far do you think Bernie Sanders will go? And we just see by his campaign rhetoric that he wants to go further than just having some bigger welfare programs. But This is what we are planning to do here with the Stopping Socialism Project. We are dedicating ourselves and our work to fighting back against socialism. And if you are as enthusiastic about this mission as we are, please follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. You could just search Stopping Socialism. You'll find one of our pages. Justin, is there anything you want to add to this little mini episode before we sign off?
Only that not only is socialism disastrous, not only do I think is it going to be disastrous for the Democratic Party, I think that that's actually underselling things. I think maybe the most important thing that I could say to my Democratic Party friends is that if you want to win people over in the states that actually matter in the election, the Midwest and in Florida, socialism is not going to work. It is going to be a complete disaster. And until you start moving back in the moderate direction, until you start embracing policies that at least to some degree have free market elements to them, you are never going to win another presidential election again, at least not anytime in the near future. So please, for the love of God, turn around, make a U-turn, do something different before it's too late.
Right. As our little logo exemplifies, you're going the wrong way. All right. Perfect. That'll be it for today, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.